Hello, dear viewers and my dear students. It's been quite a long time since I have made a video for Offbeat Gyan, and this new video is on the novel Kenilworth, the classic novel Kenilworth, which has been prescribed for the first year UG and first year PG students of Manoenmaniam Sundarnar University. This is quite a long video, and I hope you will enjoy listening to the story of Kenilworth. I have tried to do justice to this very long novel and talk about most of the important events in this video. I hope it will help you to have at least a 75% understanding of Scott's one of his greatest novels, Kenilworth. So the author of Kenilworth is Sir Walter Scott, Scottish novelist, poet and historian. Scotland is part of the British Isles, and yet it has a different culture, a different language, and Scott's novels talk about the development of history, society, politics and culture in Europe, England and Scotland. So this particular novel, Kenilworth, belongs to the 19th century because Scott belongs to the 19th century, but the novel is a historical novel. It is a historical romance because it depicts the 16th century England. That is, it talks about the Elizabethan period in English literature and English history. So that is why it is a historical novel, because it talks about or depicts a period nearly 250 years before the author was born. Walter Scott wrote this novel in the 19th century. This novel was published in 1821. But the novel is set in 16th century Elizabethan England. That is why it is a historical romance. The genre or the type is historical fiction. And what does Scott do in this novel? Well, he describes the life, the society, customs, manners, entertainments, the people and historical figures of an age more than 200 years before he was born. Scott believed that all human beings at all levels of society across the ages are driven by essentially the same passions and emotions. He makes the description of the past so familiar and interesting through his successful blending of historical characters like Queen Elizabeth with imaginary or fictional characters like Tressilian and the evil Varney in Kenilworth. So this enables the readers to establish a connection with the period, and even if it is an unfamiliar society, we are able to read, understand and enjoy the life and manners of the people who lived in that very distant past in a foreign clime. So Scott depicted the different stages in the development of English, Scottish and European society. This here is a picture of Cumnor Place. Now I'll move on to the story of this vast novel, Kenilworth. It is the tragic story of the young and beautiful Amy Robsart, daughter of Sir Hugh Robsart of Lidcote Hall, Devonshire. She falls in love with Queen Elizabeth's favourite, Robert Dudley, the powerful and handsome Earl of Leicester. They marry secretly and Amy elopes with him. Leicester wants to keep his marriage a secret from the Queen because he does not want her to be displeased with him. Throughout the novel, we find Leicester going through this conflict between love and ambition. Sometimes love wins over ambition, and at other times, ambition takes over. He is a very ambitious man who aspires to be one of the most powerful men in England. So this constant conflict in his mind has been very effectively portrayed by Walter Scott. So Leicester, he hides his wife, Amy Robsart, or the Countess Amy Robsart, at Kamna Place, a large and old manor house in the village of Kamna, which he has given to his trusted confidant and assistant, Richard Varney, his master of the horse. Now, Richard Varney has placed Anthony Foster in charge of this house. The house belongs to Anthony Foster, or Tony Fire the Faggot, the nickname by which he is popularly known in the village of Kamna. He is a turncoat. Why is he a turncoat? Because once upon a time he had been a Catholic, or one of Queen Mary's papists. By Queen Mary, I am referring to Bloody Mary, who was responsible for the murder of hundreds of Protestants during her reign. Then, when Queen Mary's stepsister, or rather half-sister, Elizabeth came to the throne, Anthony Foster became a Protestant. He was very rich, he did not mingle with the people of the village, and none knew how he had come across so much wealth. Everybody knew that there was a secret inmate at Kamna Place and that she was a female, and nobody had actually seen her, except of course the mercer Goldthread. So when the novel begins, at the Black Bear Inn, we find a couple of people belonging to Kamna sitting and talking, and Giles Gosling, the innkeeper, is serving them, and that is when Giles Gosling's nephew, Michael Lambourne, the knavish Michael Lambourne, returns to Kamna after nearly 15 years of travelling abroad. And then Giles Gosling starts talking to Tressilian. Tressilian is a very reserved, thoughtful, scholarly looking young man who doesn't much mingle with the crowd. So Giles Gosling is very intrigued by this young man, and Giles Gosling goes and talks to him, and then Tressilian reveals that he has been searching for his childhood friend and beloved Amy Robsart. Tressilian had been deeply in love with Amy, but she had rejected him, and one fine day she had gone missing, leaving him and her father in worry and anxiety. So Hugh Robsart, Amy Robsart's father, had deputed Tressilian to search for his missing daughter, and Tressilian had been looking for Amy for quite some time. Finally, he had arrived at Kamna, where he had heard of the secret female inmate at this large manor house called Kamna Place. Tressilian, though rejected, still cares deeply about Amy, and he is very concerned about her welfare. He hears the story of the secret female resident of Kamna Place, and he goes to Kamna Place with the innkeeper, Giles Gosling's nephew, Michael Lambourne. There, while Michael Lambourne and Foster are talking to each other, they are long-lost friends, Tressilian meets Amy, and he persuades her to return with him to her ailing and worried father. She refuses, saying that she needs the permission of her lord and will visit her father in due course. Tressilian is deeply hurt and disturbed to see Amy with people like Foster and in such desperate circumstances. Dejected and deeply hurt, he moves out of the house to see Richard Varney, the villain of the story. Both of them, they start fighting, and assuming that Amy had been kidnapped by Varney, he enters into a duel with Richard Varney. They fight on the grounds of Kamna Place and are separated by Michael Lambourne. Tressilian returns to the inn, and he is warned by Giles Gosling to leave the place immediately because Varney is evil personified. He is villainous and treacherous, and Michael Lambourne had been carefully watching Tressilian. Michael Lambourne had been recruited by Richard Varney to keep an eye on Tressilian. Tressilian leaves secretly at night. His horse loses its shoe on the way, and he is searching for a blacksmith. He meets the naughty and quick Dicky Sludge, or Flibbertigibbet, who takes him to the secretive and enterprising Wayland Smith. Wayland Smith was a blacksmith, a juggler, and an alchemist. Wayland Smith repairs the horseshoe and he accompanies Tressilian to Devon to meet Hugh Grobsart. A petition is drafted to be given to the Queen to complain about the missing Amy. Tressilian and Smith leave for Sayscote, house of the powerful Earl of Sussex. They arrive to find that the Earl is very sick and that he is surrounded by his faithful men and supporters. There is a pall of gloom in the place because everyone is waiting for Sussex to die, because that is how sick he is. Wayland Smith immediately takes over. He informs that he will be able to cure the Earl. He gives strict instructions that he should not be disturbed while he is continuing with the treatment of the Earl. The Earl of Sussex and the Earl of Leicester were bitter enemies. Both of them were equally ambitious and they fought for the Queen's favour. Wayland Smith gives his medicines to the Earl of Sussex and Sussex gets well. He had been given food that had been poisoned. The cook who had prepared the sauce had been provided materials by a herbalist called Demetrius. The Queen sends her personal physician to attend on Sussex, but he is not allowed to enter the premises of Sayscote, the official residence of the Earl of Sussex. Walter Raleigh, the supporter and the follower of the Earl of Sussex, prevents the Queen's personal physician from entering the house. He is miffed and he goes back and complains to the Queen that he had not been allowed to enter the house. The Queen is vexed, and then Sir Walter Raleigh goes to Greenwich Palace to apologize to the Queen for sending away her Dr. Masters. Raleigh is a charming and handsome young man, and with his deed of laying down his rich red velvet cloak on the wet and slushy ground so that the Queen doesn't get her shoes dirty, he charms his way into her attention and calms her anger against Sussex. The Queen suddenly decides to visit the recovering Sussex at his house, and the Queen and her entourage go down the Thames River and the Queen meets Sussex. The Queen is alarmed when she sees the armed supporters of Sussex at his house, and she also informs him that Raleigh will henceforth serve her and not him. Both the Earls of Leicester and Sussex are commanded by the Queen to appear in court the next day. Meanwhile, Sussex had already handed over Tressilian's petition about the missing Amy to the Queen. Tressilian mentioned that he believed that Varney was responsible for the seduction of Amy and for kidnapping her. There was bitter enmity between Sussex and Leicester. So Sussex warns his men to not begin a fight with Leicester's men in the presence of the Queen. The meeting begins with the Queen. Leicester arrives with Varney, and Sussex has Tressilian and Blount and Walter Raleigh with him. The meeting does not get off to a good start for Leicester, and he invites the wrath or the anger of the Queen. He was the Queen's favourite. He was charming in person. He was very handsome, and he knew how to charm a woman's heart. Sussex, on the other hand, was a battle-hardened warrior. He was somebody who would stand good during a battle. He did not know charms. He did not have any personal attraction. He was a straightforward man who fought with his sword. Anyway, Leicester soon turns on his charm, and the Queen begins by effecting a reconciliation between her two warring favourites by threatening them with imprisonment in the dreaded Tower of London. Reluctantly, the two lords shake hands with each other. The Queen talks about Tressilian's petition, wherein he had accused Varney of seducing Amy. Leicester is shocked and confused by the turn of events. His change of expression is noted by all, including the Queen. Varney and Tressilian, who are waiting outside the Queen's chamber, are summoned inside. Varney is quick, and he realizes that his lord is in trouble. He realizes that he must act quickly. He claims that he was married to Amy Robsart. Leicester, on hearing this, becomes angry, and he shouts at Varney, But Varney plays a clever game and manages to convince the Queen that Leicester was blameless. The Queen commands Leicester to invite Sussex for the festivities and revelry at Leicester's Kenilworth Castle, being held in honour of the Queen. She also orders that Tressilian, Varney, and Amy Robsart must be present at Kenilworth so that she can ascertain the facts of the matter herself. The Privy Council, the Queen and her most important advisers, comprising of Leicester and Sussex, meet after this to discuss important matters of state. Meanwhile, Leicester is worried and jealous of the growing importance of Sir Walter Raleigh in the Queen's court. Wayland Smith informs Tressilian that he must leave immediately because he had seen his old teacher, Dr. Demetrius Doboobie, in town. Doboobie had tried to kill Smith because he had become better than him at alchemy and magic. Smith was terrified of him and informs Tressilian that he is leaving Sayes Court. Tressilian asks him to go to Cumnor and keep him informed about Amy Robsart at Cumnor Place. Smith warns Tressilian that Sussex must be careful when he goes to Kenilworth Palace because his food may be poisoned again by his enemies. Everything that is given to Sussex must be tested for poison and that he must be extremely cautious. Leicester is an extremely ambitious man. Though he loves Amy and cares deeply for her, he also wants to rise high in the Queen's favours. And his ambitions, his plans, are encouraged by Varney, his master of the horse. Varney is evil incarnate. He is as ambitious as his lord, and he knows that when Leicester climbs, he will climb along with him. But if Leicester plunges, then Varney also will fall headlong down with him. So whenever Leicester feels guilty about hiding Amy and his secret marriage, it is Varney who encourages him with glorious promises of the future. He gives him dreams about the time when he shall be ruling over England as the Queen's consort. Leicester tells Varney that Elizabeth was someone who had the heart of a woman and the head of a man, and she was very clear about her priorities, and she would never allow her heart to rule over her head. Leicester's ambitions and his enmity with Sussex made him rely on astrology. This was a period when astrology, alchemy, and magic was reigning supreme. The rich and powerful of all times have been keen to pry into the future and learn the outcome of fate. Leicester also was one among them. He wanted to know about the future. He wanted to know what the stars had destined for him. Now, Leicester's room had a secret chamber. The key to this chamber was kept in a steel casket, and Varney was the only other person who knew of the secret chamber and its occupant. Leicester asks Varney to leave the room, and then he opens the secret chamber. The aged Alasco, or the notorious Dr. Demetrius Doboobie, steps out of the secret chamber. Their conversations reveal that Alasco had been asked by Leicester to provide the poison that was used to try and kill Sussex. Leicester blames Alasco for failing to ensure the death of the man to whom the poison had been administered. Alasco seeks the identity of the man, but Leicester refuses to reveal that it had been meant for Sussex. Alasco predicts that Leicester will have a golden future, but there is trouble brewing ahead, and he can only reveal that it will come in the form of a young man coming from the western direction. Leicester immediately decides that it will be either Tressilian or Raleigh, for both belong to Cornwall and Devon. Alasco leaves the room with Varney, and it was Varney who had ordered the old man to make such a horoscope and shape the prediction for Leicester. Alasco is an alchemist who aspires to learn the magic and chemistry of turning lead and copper into gold. Both villains get into an argument, and Alasco wonders how Sussex had escaped death. He reveals that only one other man knew of the antidote to the poison administered by him, and he had successfully killed him. Here he is referring to his pupil, Wayland Smith. He does not know that Wayland Smith had escaped death and that it was Wayland Smith who had provided the antidote to the Earl of Sussex. Varney and Alasco make their evil schemes and plans to trap the hapless and vulnerable Amy Robsart, who had to be brought into the Queen's presence at Kenilworth in a few days' time. Varney knew that Amy would never consent or agree to present herself as his wife in front of the Queen. So, without Leicester's knowledge, he planned to eliminate her. He tells Alasco to administer such a poison to Amy that she would die a slow death and not escape from her cage even if the door was left open. Alasco is shocked that Varney can be so evil and villainous. He is informed that he will be taken to Cumnor Place by Michael Lambourne, where he will have rooms to make his laboratory for his alchemy experiments. If he reveals anything, then death awaits him. Alasco and Lambourne leave for Cumnor Place, and Amy is in danger. Meanwhile, Wayland Smith arrives in Cumnor, disguised as a peddler. Peddlers in those days were not only sellers of goods, they were also bringers of information and news from the outside world. So whenever a peddler arrived, everybody would gather around him, very eager and curious to learn about what was happening in the wide world outside. So Wayland Smith talks to the crowd at the Black Bear Inn, and then he shows Giles Gosling, the innkeeper of Black Bear Inn, Tressilian's ring, and Gosling shows him the way to Cumnor Place. Anthony Foster's pretty daughter, Janet, served as Amy's only friend, companion and maid in the old and lonely Cumnor Place. Both of them are very excited when they learn about the arrival of the peddler and his goods. They meet him, they see the beautiful silks and trinkets he has with him. He informs them about the festivities at Kenilworth Palace, where the Queen will be Leicester's guest for a week. He says that there are rumors that England may soon have a king. Hearing this, Amy is enraged and she shouts at the peddler. Janet calms her down. Smith, the peddler, then gives her a medicine, telling her that it will cure her depression if she ever feels it. It is actually an antidote for the poison that will be given to her by Alasco under Varney's instructions. Smith and Tressilian had already anticipated that Varney might try to kill Amy Robsart. Smith warns Janet about the impending danger, and he tells her that Alasco would soon come and try to poison Amy. He tells her that Amy should be careful, and he asks Janet that she be faithful to the hapless Amy. Janet, daughter of the evil and greedy Foster, was devoted and loyal to Amy. She knew the black heart of Varney and was afraid of the harm he could cause to the unhappy and sad Amy. Now, while they were talking, Lambourne, Foster, and Alasco enter the grounds. Smith hides himself. Janet overhears the conversation, and she is scared for Amy's life. After some time, Varney also arrives at Cumnor Place, and he talks to Amy. He reveals whatever had happened at the court. Amy deeply dislikes Varney, and he knows of it. They meet behind closed doors, and he tells her that she must appear before the Queen as his wife. She is enraged and agitated. Foster and Janet rush into the chamber. Amy rages at Varney, and he leaves the room with Foster. Amy is deeply troubled by the turn of events. She finds herself in a hapless and desperate situation. Varney and Foster go into the secret rooms allotted to Alasco for his laboratory, and then Foster arrives in Amy's room with a glass cup and a flask. His trembling hands and his nervous manner made Amy suspect that he bore poison for her in his hands. Janet takes hold of the cup and tries to drink from it, but Foster prevents his daughter from consuming it. He also refuses to partake of it when the Countess Amy asks him to do so. A visibly agitated Foster leaves the room with the poison still in his hand. He had failed in his mission, and his daughter is ashamed of the treachery of her father. She is terribly upset and she leaves the room quickly. Janet quickly meets Wayland Smith and they plan to help the Countess Amy Robsart leave for Kenilworth so that she can escape from Varney's evil clutches and be reunited with her husband, the Earl of Leicester. While Janet had gone outside, Amy had drunk the poison which was brought for her once again. But Janet calms her down, saying that she would not die because she had already taken the antidote for the poison. Janet tells her that she must leave for Kenilworth as quickly as possible and that the peddler would help her arrive at Kenilworth. She also tells him that the peddler was a trusted confidant of Tressilian. So, the ill-fated countess and the peddler leave Cumnor Place that night. They join a group of travelling performers on their way to Kenilworth for the great revelry and festivities in honour of the Queen. Flibbertigibbet is one of the band and he is very curious about Amy. Smith informs him that Amy is his sister. Flibbertigibbet does not believe Wayland Smith. He continues to be suspicious. Wayland Smith and Amy Robsart arrive at Kenilworth and part ways. Amy hands over a letter addressed to the Earl of Leicester to Wayland Smith. Amy sees the splendor, the power, and the wealth of her powerful husband when she arrives there unknown, unwelcome, and escorted by a poor juggler. She enters the castle, sad and depressed, and seeks refuge in one of the rooms in the castle. She is surprised to see Tressilian entering the room, and both of them are shocked. Amy is enraged when Tressilian refers to her as Varney's wife, but she also refuses to reveal that she is the wife of Leicester. Tressilian is deeply worried about Amy, but she makes him promise that he will not do anything for a day. Worried and anxious about Amy's terrible condition, Tressilian agrees to do nothing for a day. Amy had handed over a letter to Wayland Smith. Wayland Smith meets Tressilian and he informs Tressilian that he has lost the letter. They get into an argument and Smith decides to inform Amy about the loss of the letter. But he is unable to find her and then he decides to leave Kenilworth. The Queen asks for Amy's presence and Leicester informs her that Amy had been unable to come because of her sickness. Tressilian contradicts her and tells her that Varney and Tressilian are lying. The Queen is outraged that Tressilian has dared to blame her favourite. An agitated Tressilian, deeply in love with Amy, kneels down in front of the Queen and holds on to her robe, pleading with her to take action against Varney. The Queen orders Tressilian to be removed from her court and Raleigh takes him to the chambers allotted to the followers of Sussex. Troubled state of mind is very unlike his usual reserved and dignified behavior. Meanwhile, Amy thinks that her letter has reached her husband and that he will come to her aid. She waits for him, thinking that he will come at night to see her. She rests for a while, nightmares haunting her. Michael Lambourne comes upon Amy in the chamber and tries to ravage her. She cries out and then escapes from the chamber into the garden. The unhappy Duchess sits hidden in a small grotto in the garden until morning. The Queen and Leicester walk into the garden and the Earl proposes to the Queen, while his young, desperate and unhappy wife waits hidden in the grotto, unaware of her ambitious husband's planning and proposing. The Queen refuses the proposal, but she is moved by Leicester's appeal of love. She says she must be the wife and mother of England alone. Then the Queen enters the grotto where the unhappy Countess Amy has sought refuge. The poor Countess falls at her feet and begs for her protection. The agitated Countess informs the Queen that she seeks punishment for Richard Varney, who had imprisoned her and sought to kill her. She says that she was not his wife and that the Earl of Leicester knows everything. The queen is angry that the woman at her feet was blaming her favorite earl, and she immediately summons Leicester. She asks him if he knew Amy, and then the queen thunders that if he was found to be lying, then he faced imminent death. Amy realizes that her husband's life is in peril, and she pleads with the queen that Leicester was innocent. The queen orders that the countess must be confined in a room after she witnesses her nervous state, her agitated behavior, and her contradictory statements. That night, Varney and Leicester come secretly to the chamber where Amy is confined, and the earl talks to his doomed young wife. She pleads with him to reveal the secret of their marriage and accept her in public as his wife. For a moment, he thinks of doing so. But then Varney reminds him of his ambition, and he also tells him that Amy and Tressilian had met each other and talked for a long time at Cumnor Place. Leicester is made to believe that Amy had cheated him by teaming up with Tressilian, loyal to Sussex. The Earl trusts Varney more than his devoted and unfortunate wife. The Earl gives permission to Varney to kill the Countess because he assumes that she had cheated him. A meeting with Tressilian reveals the fact that Amy had been true in her love for the Earl, and he realizes that he had been hasty in judging Amy. Varney moves very quickly, and he leaves Kenilworth with the hapless Countess, prepared to kill her as soon as he reaches Cumnor Place. Varney senses that the Earl might change his mind, so he and Foster move very quickly, and they leave Kenilworth with the unfortunate, ill-fated Countess, prepared to kill her. The Earl returns to find that Varney has left long before he was supposed to go, and he orders Michael Lamburn to go after Varney and inform him that no harm should befall the Countess Amy Robsart, his young, lovely wife. Lamburn goes after Varney. He delivers the message to Varney. The evil Varney shoots him dead and continues on his journey to Cumnor Place. Poor Amy had been declared insane, and she can find no help or relief all through the journey. There is nobody to help her. She is completely alone and vulnerable. She is terrified of Varney and realizes that he is evil and unscrupulous. They arrive at Cumnor Place, and Varney orders that Amy should be taken to Foster's private room where he hides his gold on the top floor of the house. Janet is no longer there. She has been sent away to her aunt's place. Now, this particular room where Anthony Foster used to hide his gold had a trapdoor in front of the door, and the floor was like a drawbridge. When Foster was inside this room, he could lift up the wooden floor outside the door with a hidden lever inside the room. This was so that he could count his gold in peace. But now, Amy had been imprisoned in this room, and the rope that was attached to the lever was tied outside the room on the side of the climbing stairs. Varney and Foster quietly cut off the edges of the wooden support so that even a light weight on it would make it plunge down. They left the door open, waiting for the Countess to try and escape. But she had become so listless and lost all hope that she remained inside the room, probably waiting her husband's arrival. Varney became impatient, and the next evening he whistled just like the Earl did when he used to come to visit Amy in happier times. Poor, desperate, ill-fated Amy, thinking that it was her husband, rushed out of the room, and as soon as her slender feet touched the board, she plunged to her death. Tressilian and Raleigh arrived and found the limp body of Amy, shown to them by Foster, who then disappeared. None knew of the fate of Foster until years later a skeleton was found on the top of an iron chest with gold inside. in the secret chamber in which the Countess had been lodged before her death. Varney was caught and thrown into prison, where he died after consuming poison given to him by Alasco. The Earl had revealed the secret of his marriage to the Queen. She had pardoned him, and he was filled with remorse over the evil fate that had befallen his lovely Amy. Tressilian was plagued by the vision of Amy's dead body, and he could not continue living in England. Hugh Grobsart died soon after, leaving all his property to Tressilian. But Tressilian left for Virginia, the new lands in America, with Raleigh. He was so saddened by the plight and death of his lovely Amy that he died young in those foreign climes. And thus ends Sir Walter Scott's greatest novel, Kenilworth. Thank you.